Hello everyone and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashew and I'm joined by my good friend, the host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
Jesus does not want me for a sunbeam.
Oh, good God. Well, I blame you for this movie, but to be fair, I had seen it before, so it's not, I know some people that outright refuse to watch this movie. We're going to be talking about the first film of Documentary Month, films that were picked by you, Mike White, because I've kind of just been ceding control of this year, CultureCast-wise, to my friends who also do podcasts because, I don't know, everybody kind of has different stuff, and so I think it's pretty interesting what kind of people come up with. We're going to be talking about Jesus Camp from 2006. Film is directed by Heidi Ewing and Rachel Grady, and it is a documentary that follows and documents the children... Oh, God damn it. What the hell is it called? Children on Fire camp in North Dakota put on by Becky
Ringo Lamb?
Ring of Lamb?
No, Ringo Lamb. He did, Prison on Fire, City on Fire. I thought maybe Children on Fire was his other thing.
Kids on Fire is what it's called. And it's run in North Dakota by Becky Fischer, who is a preacher / person who uses the cult of personality and then the naivete of children to her benefit to try and, I would say, evangelize them more than they already are. It is a Christian summer camp for evangelical children. And most of those children come from outside of Kansas City in a town called Lee's Summit, which, having gone to school in Missouri for a handful of years, I am more than familiar with that part of Kansas City.
This is a sick old world.
Kids, you gotta change things.
Boys and girls can change the world? Absolutely.
I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag.
There are two kinds of people in the world. People who love Jesus and people who don't.
Speak the word of the Lord.
Where should we be putting our focus? I'll tell you where our enemies are putting it. They're putting it on the kids. How long have you been a Christian?
At 5, I got saved.
Yeah?
Because I just wanted more of life.
You go into Palestine and they're taking their kids to camps like we take our kids to Bible camps, and they're putting hand grenades in their hands.
I got Jesus, yes I do. I got Jesus. There's an excitement, yet there's a peace with it all, too. It's really cool. I really feel that we're a key generation to Jesus coming back. And we are a generation that needs to rise up and run with that baton.
How many of you want to be those who would give up their lives for Jesus?
We're being trained to be God's army.
Not enough!
You are the beginnings of a movement. Raise up righteous judges!
There's a new church like this every 2 days in America.
25% of the American population, that's about 80 million people.
If the evangelicals vote, they determine the election.
They've taken over the White House, Congress, the judiciary for a generation.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
This means war. This means war. Are you a part of it or not?
So, before we start talking about the movie, and Mike, I know you and I are going to have a ton to talk about with this movie. I want to know why you picked this movie, because I have my idea as to why you picked this movie, especially with the political climate the way it is now. But I'm curious, Mike, why did you pick this movie?
When I suggested documentaries for this month, I tried to think of the ones that have stuck with me the most. I mean, there are good documentaries, and then there are the ones that stick with you. Sometimes even if maybe they're not the most well-crafted or whatever, and I'm not saying that about this one, but there are some where there are ideas that will be with you forever. There's a documentary called Holy Ghost People that looks at the, I think it's Seventh-day Adventists in West Virginia, and there are so many striking images in that film, and it's tough to find that one. Jesus Camp is another one that just stuck with me. And this, when people ask about recommendations for horror films, I recommend Jesus Camp because this is the most terrifying movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, bar none. You can keep your Suspirias and your children shouldn't play with dead things. Any horror horror movie that you can think of, real life is scarier, and this movie is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
So, and that's not the first time I've heard that. I'm going to disagree with you about this being a truly scary movie, primarily because of where I grew up. And I was born outside of San Francisco. I grew up until I was out of high school in North Texas. So this movie isn't that scary for me because I knew people that were like this. So it's, and I'm not going to name names, but I'm friends with some of these people still. I have no problem being friends with them because they know that I don't believe in this line of thinking and they know not to talk about it around me, and I'm still friends with them. I mean, I'm not going to not be friends with someone just because of what they believe in. And I know that that's a controversial statement, especially in this day and age, but there are things in my life that I kind of don't cede control over, and one of them is, you want to be an evangelical Christian, cool, just don't bring it up around me, because I don't care, and I am not Christian at all. I am as far from being Christian as humanly possible, so I know that we're of different mind when it comes to that.
Well, I have friends that are devout. I have a dear friend of mine who is a Jehovah's Witness, and he knows the Bible, many versions of it, backwards and forwards. He's the guy that I go to and I say, okay, explain the difference between this and this. And he's like my go-to guy because he is so learned when it comes to the Bible. And I'm friends with Jewish people. I imagine that I have at least one Muslim friend out there. I'm not sure. But I don't care if people are religious. I kind of admire that sometimes about people, but it's that word. It's that proselytizing that is what gets me. So I can be friends with somebody who is religious. I can even be friends with somebody who maybe doesn't want to believe science over their religion and wants to think that the earth is only 6,000 years old. Some of those kind of cockamamie things, but there are people that believe weird shit all the time. Those people who believe that, if you put a hat on the bed, there's something bad is going to happen to you. So it's like, okay, whatever. You can believe some of your crazy ideas. That's fine. But it's the proselytizing. It's the don't come up to me in a bowling alley and hand me like a little Jesus pamphlet. That's when you cross the line. That's when you can pray to Jesus to get a strike. That's fine. But don't come up to me and force your stuff on me and then also think that I have an agenda for you because you are different than me. And I think that's like one of the worst things is that you project your own fears onto other people and you think that they're out to get you when maybe you're the one that's actually out to get them. Especially, one of the opening things in this movie is they're talking about the importance of children, and the devil gets you when you're young. And it's like, you realize that you're talking to children and you're trying to, quote unquote, get them. It's like,
but it's okay if
you are the
it.
person. Exactly. It's okay if you're doing it.
Hypocrisy in this film is just...
it's deep.
Yeah, it's astounding. So, because I've never asked you, but I feel like this podcast is as good a time as any. What do you consider yourself to be?
Oh, I'm 100% atheist.
Okay, so I'm an agnostic atheist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that means you can't make up your fucking mind.
No. An agnostic... I don't believe in any deity, but it's unknowable or unprovable that there is one anyways. You can't, I don't believe in anything and you can't prove that there is anything. It is a thing, and go look it up. It's not a double dip chipper. It's not a fucking queso with meat in it, motherfucker. This queso fundido. I like meat dip, but I also like cheese dip, so let me combine them. That's not what this is. You son of a bitch.
I am chaotic evil. So
I know, it's okay. I am too, so I get it. But as someone who does not believe and contends that you cannot prove that there is anything, watching a film like this and watching these children being indoctrinated into this evangelical bubble, and that's ultimately what this movie is. That's ultimately all this film is watching these families of people raise their children in a bubble, in a shell, so thick that there is no room for any sort of argument as to, or even introduction of new ideas. And again, I am perfectly fine with that. You want to raise your children the way you want to raise them. That's everyone's God-given right. Get it? No pun intended. It is everyone's right to raise their children the way they see fit. That's your job as a parent. So that's kind of where this movie is in a gray area for me, because inherently what they're doing isn't wrong, right? I mean, it's their job to raise their children as they see fit. It's not my job to tell them how to raise their children any more than it's your job. However, my issue comes down to what they are teaching their children is to not even be able to have a conversation with someone else.
Right.
They essentially are saying, no, I can't even talk to you about the fact that science may have some good points. And ultimately, science is this is going to sound fucking stupid, but science in and of itself is somewhat of a religion as well. To some extent. Not completely. I mean, there's evidence and facts that you can look at. But you could make the argument that science is a religion in and of itself. But the fact that these people are telling their children, you cannot even talk to other people.
Right.
I think that's where I have the biggest problem here. It's just that there's no room for not even playful banter, because I'll give my religious friends a hard time sometimes, and they know it, and they're allowed to give it right back to me, but there's not even room for, like, constructive arguments. And that's my biggest takeaway from this is the evangelicals don't want anyone to talk to them about anything that they don't believe in.
Well, and it's crazy to me, too, when they bring up the problem of evil and they don't even have an answer for it. The whole problem of evil thing is, if God is all-powerful and could make the world a better place, why doesn't he? And they have no reason for that other than possibly the earth is going to die soon anyway because Jesus is going to come back. So, hey, let's party. Let's do whatever the hell we want to do, and that's why, like, and it just plays into all of these. It's amazing. Like, I had forgotten how many political things that it gotten into. It's just like, they're immediately teaching one of the kids, like, hey, what about climate change? Oh, well, the earth has only gone up like a tenth of a degree, and that's just natural shifting, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, wow, you're like all these answers from rote. It's like, let's train you now so you can jump onto Fox News later on and just have all those pat answers for your panel discussion. And it's just like, wow, and the idea of like, yeah, we're just going to be around until Jesus comes back, and he's going to be back here any minute now, so do whatever the fuck you want.
It's like waiting for Guffman.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, where he's coming. We promise.
He'll be here.
He's going to wash us in the blood. He's coming. That's the crazy thing, right? And that's what that's talking about the way that they approach this movie, which I think is why people are like, it's so scary. It's because inherently hyper-religious, aka evangelicals, are painted as right-wingers, conservatives. Which I guarantee you there have to be some evangelicals who are liberals, right? There have to be. I don't know where they are, but they have to exist, right?
They do nothing to dissuade us from that argument in this movie, and especially, like I said, so many of their things are just playing right into political arguments, and it's just...
Well, and that's the bias of the filmmakers. That's every filmmaker who makes a film, especially documentaries, have an idea, a topic that they're trying to get across. And so they wouldn't necessarily show something to that otherwise because it wouldn't exactly help their film. But everyone in this film, at best I can tell, is like a hardcore conservative. And again, nothing wrong with it, but it's not helping the perception that your religious beliefs are separated from your political beliefs. But to the point where they have a George Bush cutout, which I think is the most surreal part of this entire film. It's the best scene in the entire movie, but it's also the one where I'm just like, boy, wait, what is going on now? Like, you're pray to George Bush? Okay?
And yeah, pray to the Lord to raise up the righteous judges so we can turn back the tide and get rid of abortion and all of these things. There would be a third more of you children here today if babies weren't aborted. Really? 33% of the population is aborted? Really?
That's correct. That's the correct statement. You know how I know? because that guy said it.
Because Jesus told me so.
And
I know.
And he had the little box of the fetuses, which, again, just, man, what the woman, Becky Fischer, says in the film is so true. She says that this generation, and I'd like to point out to you that these children are my generation. This is my generation of kids. These are the kids that are my age. I looked into some of the kids. So there are, like, 3 kids in the film. There's Levi, the kid with the fucking rat tail.
There's a sensuous dancer who dances for the flesh sometimes.
No. There's Levi. Yeah. There's Rachel, who is the most insufferable child in the film. She's the one. I know people like that. So it's like, okay, like I'm looking into your past, seeing you as a child. And then there's Tori, like you were saying, she dances for the Lord. She's got some mad moves, and she loves Christian death metal. Okay. I mean, I looked into these kids. They're all still very much into the church. However, the kid who was on the stage talking about how he struggles with his belief is now into Eastern religions and psychotropic drugs. And he thinks that the woman, Becky Fischer, like, exploited all the kids in the movie. And
you think?
Well, yeah, but I mean, man, Mike, it's hard to fucking shine a mirror onto these people. It's hard to put up a mirror to anyone's face and be like, look at you! What are you? It's like, come on. It's hard because these people are so insulated. The fact that 75% of these kids are homeschooled, it's astounding.
I just had a conversation with somebody in my life, and they said, oh yeah, I'm thinking about homeschooling, and my wife and I were just like, do not homeschool. Like, both of us were like, do not homeschool. And I out of my mouth, I didn't even like think about these words as they flew out of my mouth, and I just said, only freaks and weirdos are homeschooled.
Well, and I mean, here's the thing. I know people that are homeschooled, and they seem perfectly fine now.
Well, that's good.
But they're also the kind of people who don't give a shit about this kind of stuff. They've shirked the religion of which they were brought up in. Mm-hmm. But I mean, 75% of these kids being homeschooled, I don't know what percentage of them have turned their back on the evangelical religion. The purpose of homeschooling, if you're an evangelical parent, is to ensure that you are teaching your kids what you want to teach them. That is what the mother says. That's what Levi's mother in this film says, is I don't want them to learn something that I can't teach them.
Right.
It's like, oh God, like it must be really tough for to not want your kids to make friends outside of the church. It must be terrible for your kids not to meet anyone else who's different from them. It's like, I don't even know how these people find time in the day to homeschool their kids. I guess
they have nothing else to do.
2006 was a cheaper time, is what this was.
It was right before the recession.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they want to form that bubble. They just want their kids in that bubble, and they're going to indoctrinate them with everything from their weird dinosaurs reading facts about the age of the earth stuff.
That's awesome. How dare you? That's the best part of this whole movie.
Oh, man. And then about how evolution is a myth and all this stuff. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, yeah, science could be treated like a religion, but the thing about science is that in order to be good science, you have to admit your mistakes. We have to know, like, oh yeah, there are particles that are smaller than molecules. Yeah, we have to know that there are things that make up atoms, Like, we can't just say, that's it, end of story, we're not going to learn anymore. We're learning stuff all the time. So we have to constantly be revising stuff. But yeah, for them, it's just like, nope, we heard this once, and we know that that's the truth, and we'll build up whatever circular logic we need to in order to prevent ourselves from learning anything else. And it's like, oh my goodness. And the thing
it's a feedback loop. That's all this is. It's the religious thing is a feedback loop. Because no one is ever saying anything out of turn. And that's the weird thing. Like, you've got these people. I don't want to insult these people because, again, I don't want to be worse than them. Right. Because they think that we're heathens who are all going to hell. That's fine. I welcome it. I like warm weather. They're pledging to the Christian flag.
Yeah.
What is even happening anymore? They're pledging to the Christian flag. One kid has the flag of Israel. This is something I've never understood. The whole Israel thing. Again, having been raised in a household where my mom was Catholic growing up, she went to Catholic school. My dad was not, but still believes. And I was baptized in a Greek Orthodox church. Yet no one in my family is Orthodox or Greek. So I had less body hair than everyone else at the church is what I'm trying to say. It's just, I don't understand the Israel thing with why is Israel important. I didn't even realize the Christian flag was a thing. I always forget that until I watch this movie. Like, the Christian flag sounds made up. Almost looks like a white, like a KKK flag in a way. Again, that may be showing my ignorance, and that's, I apologize. But the thing that, the feedback loop of this movie, the thing that always gets me every time I watch it, and I don't know if you notice this, but every time there's someone who has said that they don't inherently outright believe in God, and they, like the one kid who struggles with his belief, and rightfully so. I mean, belief is a hard thing to quantify. You're believing in something that you can't see it.
Right.
The looks on everyone else's faces is it's so upsetting, because you look at these people that are essentially blindly following what they've been told to believe. Whether or not they actually believe it, I honestly don't know if that child, Rachel, the insufferable bowling alley child, I don't actually know if she believes what it means to be religious. She was praying to God to help her bowl. That's not how that works. That's actually the antithesis of how any of this works. You don't ask for God to help you get a strike when you're playing bowling with all of your religious friends. That's not how, you know what I mean? Like, that's not how this works, right? At least that's not what I was led to believe is how it works.
If she gets a strike, it means that God loves her. And if she doesn't get a strike, it means that God's sending her a message that she needs to do better, or that he's teaching her a lesson about something else. I love that whole circuitous logic as well. It's like, that whole, like, give me a sign. Well, the sign is that God doesn't want to give you a sign. He wants you to struggle with that and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, okay, you can say anything that you want to say, and suddenly it has weight and meaning for you. And, they openly talk in here about the indoctrination of Palestinians and, jihadists and all this stuff. Just, oh my gosh, that is so terrible. And then you see them, and it's all of this repeat after me kind of stuff. And I've never, even when it comes to the Pledge of Allegiance, I've never had a good feeling when it's a repeat after me kind of thing, because it's just like, it's scary, and in this movie, for me, it's very scary when it's just like, that all of these people all saying the same words, following the leader kind of stuff. I mean, it's even scary for me when I go into a church for a wedding and it's like, peace be upon you, and the congregation is, and also with you. And it's just like, whoa, what just happened? It just always freaks me out.
How do you feel about the Star Spangled Banner at like sporting events?
I'm fine singing a song and singing a national song.
But it feels kind of the same way.
It's a little bit the same way. We have an okay song. I would prefer if they did "O Canada." I kind of like that song better. But there are catchier songs out there.
Well, I will agree with you on that.
I mean, I've been in a band. I love the idea of everybody, and I'm talking about a marching band. So I've played the Star Spangled Banner. I don't know how many times. I've played the school fight song. I don't know how many times. But there's a level of patriotism, there's a level of school spirit, and then there's a level of fanaticism. And I think we're at the fanaticism level. And to the point where they're talking about, like, wouldn't it be a great thing to give your life for Jesus? And it's like, whoa, this is a little nuts.
Well, wouldn't it be cool to be a martyr? That's what Rachel says at the end of the film. It's cool to be a martyr. Kid, you don't even understand what that means. And that's where I walk back with the whole back to the bowling alley. It's praying to God to help you get a strike. You don't even understand what that means. You don't understand. And it's like, being a martyr is cool. Being a martyr is not cool. Being a martyr is about as far from being cool as humanly possible. Unless it's for some truly grand cause, which fighting the Muslims that are putting the AK-47s in their kids' hands, and we're doing the same thing, it's not the same.
Right.
But you know what? I'll tell you what, Mike. Harry Potter is a villain of the devil. He is a warlock. They are God's enemies. They are warlocks. Oh,
she comes out of left field with that. It's just
really out of left field.
Harry Potter would have been put to death in the Old Testament. You do not make heroes out of warlocks. I was like, whoa.
Oh, hey, oof, boy. You must really not like J.K. Rowling, the most successful female writer of all time. But
she should be in the kitchen, or she should be homeschooling some kids. She should be having some
praying to Jesus. Oh, Lord. She should be sitting in front of the mirror for what seems to be probably an hour, primping herself, to then come out and ask everyone what they think of her looks, which, to me, again, seems to be very indicative of the kind of person this lady is. At her core, she is the kind of person who relies on the attention and adoration of others. And it's not actually about teaching the kids anything. It's not. None of this is about teaching the kids anything. This is about her making money and her securing her position in the afterlife, otherwise known as, more M&Ms in a bowl to eat on her couch while she watches children crying and praying to God, which I'm sure she gets some sort of satisfaction out of.
Yeah. That is so creepy too.
And that's the thing, nothing in this movie bothers me except for her. Except for Becky Fischer. She bothers me because she is clearly an exploitative engine. And she knows what she's doing. And you can tell when she's talking to the kids, and then when she talks to mike-papantonio at the end of the film, her tone has changed. Her tone of voice changes completely. And it's like, you know what, lady? I get that you can put one over on the kids, but you can't put one over on everybody else. And that's what makes this film great, is that it displays the inherent hypocrisy in who she is. Because ultimately, this movie is more about her than anybody else. I mean, the kids in this movie they're kind of put upon by everyone else. They're molded by all the outside forces.
Did you notice the camera work in the movie and how the camera is usually at a lower angle looking up at the adults? So it's at a kid's level, which is a really nice thing for them to do.
Yeah, I did notice that.
The thing I want to say right here, Chris, is that I pray that people will listen to this podcast. I pray that your numbers go up. I pray that nothing happens to this recording, that nothing happens to your Google document while you're looking at it. I just want the Lord to take care of things like that.
It's, the circular logic of these folks is just, it's the worst. These kids, you know what bugs me? Is these kids should be at a summer camp having fun. Mm-hmm. When I don't know about you, but I was, of all things, you want to talk about being in organizations that are absolute dog shit. I was in the Boy Scouts growing up. I hate it. If I have kids, would never put them through that. I don't care how good it looks on your resume if you're an Eagle Scout, because I guarantee you I'm an Eagle Scout and it hasn't done nothing for me other than warrant jokes from my friends asking me if I was molested by my scout leader, which I wasn't, but I mean, it's a low-hanging fruit joke at this point, and it's a joke that will never go away. But when I was a kid, I went to scout camp, and I had fun, and there was none of this indoctrination nonsense. Maybe not inherently, I'm sure there was some. But it's not this kind of indoctrination. The kind of indoctrination I got was be self-sufficient, don't be a dick, stuff like that. The Boy Scout motto. But these kids
don't be a dick. The Boy Scout motto. Don't be a dick.
Let's start those scouts, and that's just instead of on my honor, I please whatever. I don't even remember it anymore. But it's just on my honor, I promise not to be a dick. These kids should be out having fun, right? They should be out doing fun things, not listening to some made-up clown pontificating about how you grab a tiger by the tail and then all of a sudden it becomes a lion, inherently showing she has no idea how animals grow up.
The thing is, man, is that these people are terrorists insofar as they are terrorizing these children. They don't know any better, though. That's the problem.
I
grew up, one of my friends, when I was growing up, her mom was a devout Christian of some sort. And there was a time where she came over and I was manipulating my hand or something, and I was just like, oh look, I can make like a chair out of my fingers, holding two down and one up or whatever. And she was just like, oh, you have to be careful, don't put your finger up in the air because you're pointing at God. And I was just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And those weird little things where it's just they're to the point, to your point, they're talking like these kids are at a camp and they're like talking like ghost stories and stuff. And the one guy immediately shuts them down. It's just like, oh yeah, but if you talk about ghost stories, that's not honoring God. And I was just like,
who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent News Service, sir. Founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Socks don't have to come in just black and white, and at Jilly Socks and Such, you can find not only that unique pair of sassy socks, but also gifts for any occasion. Started by former teacher Lori and former student, now namesake Jillian, their store has a pair of socks for every event, personality, and interest. Be it a snarky pair for work, a pair emblazoned with your favorite sports team, or just something silly for lounging, Jilly Socks and Such can have you sliding into your new favorite pair of socks today. I just recently picked up a pair of Bigfoot socks that are about as badass as they are comfy, and they are a perfect addition to my growing collection of socks. They are located at 3900 Old Cheney Road, Suite 202, Lincoln, Nebraska, and online at jillysocks.com. Mention the Culture Cast and get 15% off your next purchase at Jilly's. And remember, let your socks do the talking at Jilly Socks and Such.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
Oh,
wow.
No. I remember telling ghost stories when I was a kid at scout camp. That was part of the evening ritual.
Right.
On top of being raped in your sleeping bag, but again, right. I was never touched in my sleep. And we can't make rape jokes. Sorry. We can't make rape jokes.
No, because eventually Disney will get us fired for that.
Yeah, they will fire me from my own podcast. I can't.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yep.
I apologize. That was an insensitive joke. I shouldn't be using swear words. God damn it, I hate when people say swear words.
Oh, man.
Not like saying fuck, shit, piss, cunt, all that. I hate when someone says the phrase swear words.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Telling someone else not to say something is a form of censorship. You shouldn't do it. People should understand that if you go up to someone on the street and say, go fuck yourself, it is probably within the other person's right to get angry, and that's fine. You should understand the consequences of what you say, but you should be allowed to say anything, as long as you understand that if you go and say a racial slur at an African-American person, they're probably not going to like it very much, but swear words, or as my father says, pejoratives. It's like, you know what? It's like the ghost story thing. It's like you're not praying, you're not loving God by doing this.
Right.
You're hating God. And it's like, you know what? That's now everything is hating God. You do anything wrong and you're hating God. It's like, what can we do that isn't looked down upon in the eyes of the Lord? Please tell me, because as far as I can tell, in this film, everything is inappropriate in the eyes of the Lord.
You just have to pray and honor Jesus, and that's about it.
And watch the Harry Potter films at your dad's house.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Again, did you see the reactions on the faces of the people in the film? They're like, oh, Lord.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. He's watching those movies.
And the logic, too, where it's like, you know, every other church indoctrinates their kids. Why not us? It's like, oh, my goodness.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
From a standpoint of what they're trying to do, but that doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. We'll take a commercial break, and we'll be back with more discussion after the break. All right, we are back and talking about Jesus Camp. Mike, before the break, you had something you were going to say, and I kind of cut you off. So what were you going to say?
I don't remember now.
Okay, so let me just...
Oh, I was saying I was saying that there's a line in the movie that gets me where they talk about, every other church is indoctrinating people, so why not us? And it's just like, come on, guys. And the other thing that gets me is because there's a thread going throughout this whole movie of who's going to be the new person on the Supreme Court and who is George Bush going to appoint to the Supreme Court. And, we need to pray to God to rise up righteous judges and all this kind of stuff. And it just, that garbage that was happening then is just so even more meaningful now, especially as we're talking about who's going to be on the Supreme Court and all this kind of stuff. And just the level of fervor from the people that are in this film, I know that you're a big MAGA believer, but I mean, this is just, it's that level of, circular logic again of whatever the president says is right, so we will believe him thick or thin.
And if someone says it's wrong, it's fake news.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sir, I don't know where you're getting your information from. I do not believe in MAGA. MAGA and I are not friends.
I have audio. I have
audio. I heard him say it. He's going to get fired from Disney because of it. No, the thing, and so I've seen this film now 3 times in the last 3 days. I watched it over the weekend, stoned out of my mind, which, by the way, is the best way to watch this movie. I watched it again yesterday to do some prep for the podcast, and I watched it today again, just kind of have it in the back of my mind, because I wanted to kind of really get into the mindset of this film. And I remember when I was watching it stoned, the only thing I could think of is this film could have been made this year. And you would hope that 12 years later things would be better. But to some extent, we haven't come very far when it comes to stuff like this.
Oh, it feels like we've gone backwards.
Well, it depends. Depends on what we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, I guess with these folks, it will never go forward. They will always be stuck in this circle, this racetrack that they're on, and they're just always chasing the same thing over and over again, and they're never going to let it go, and they're never going to let it go, and they're never going to let it go. And it's like, you guys have nothing defines these kids outside of their religion. You notice that? Like, the one kid dances, okay. The one kid is an insufferable turd because all she does is tell everyone else about how much she loves Jesus, and she's coloring Jesus coloring books all the time. Again, perfectly fine, but then the other kid wants to be a pastor. But it's like, these kids are ciphers because they have no personality because it's been beaten out of them. And not beaten physically, but if religion is a bat, their head is a watermelon, and they're the Gallagher show that is religion. It's been beaten out of them. Any personality or anything that sets them apart from anyone else has been beaten out of them by religion.
Yeah, their brains have been scooped out and other stuff has been put in instead.
Yeah, and, they make the whole case that, it's only because they're kids. Otherwise, no one would be able to take advantage of them. I guess that's true. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they don't. This is Jesus Camp. It's for kids, but I have to assume that there are people who are my age that are getting saved. I mean, I know they had the number at the beginning of the film that 43% of people that are born again are before they're 13.
Mm-hmm.
But there have to be people that are getting saved at my age or at your age, right? I mean, it can't just be all kids.
Right. Well, it's been my experience that if somebody has a very hard substance abuse problem, that they're much more likely to get saved when they're older after they give up the substances or helps them.
Well, isn't Alcoholics Anonymous just a religious group?
That's part of the problem, I think, is, they rely too much on that. Though they tend to try to get away from that by saying higher power or a power greater than them. So, no, of course it's not religious.
Right. It's not God, but a higher power. They're not talking about the Boston song, I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
It's just, and like I said, everything about these kids is just religion. I mean, the one kid, Levi, he's wearing a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup t-shirt that just says Jesus King of Kings on it.
Yeah.
It's like, do these kids have nothing to... I mean, I know little kids. Like, we have friends that have kids, and these kids have vibrant personalities. And I look at these kids, I'm like, you guys are never going to know what it's like to, I don't know, stay up late on a Friday night watching a horror movie downstairs when your parents think you're supposed to be asleep. Like, you never know any of this. You'll never know what it's like to wake up on a Saturday morning and watch cartoons, because you are completely devoid of the personality aspect of who you are. And I think that that's the saddest part about this this movie.
Right.
Is that religion is essentially a vacuum, and they're sucking everything good out of these kids. And it's just, it's really sad, because it's still going on. It's never not going to go on. Unless tomorrow there was a way to prove there was no God, which, by the way, if that were the case, people would still say it was fake. Fake news. CNN reported there is no God. Oh, CNN, Clinton News Network. But this will always be happening. Always.
Yeah, and it's just the numbers game, and they even say in the documentary, it's like, oh yeah, these kids are going to grow up and they're going to vote the way that we want them to vote. And it's like, wow, really? I mean, it's so right there on the surface, and I'm not even like reading into it. It's just basically like, we are teaching these kids to vote the way that we want them to vote. They're going to vote conservative.
Yeah, and again, separation of church and state is important. I will say this, I have no problem indoctrinating your children into religion. That is your right and duty as a parent to teach your children some form of values. I mean, again, do I agree with evangelical Christianity? Of course not. But far be it from me to tell someone you cannot tell your kids a moral compass growing up. The problem is for some reason that bleeds into religion, and I think everyone should be allowed to kind of come to their own religious or their own political kind of epiphany and form their own set of beliefs and not be told these set of beliefs are in line with what we've taught you, so if you don't do this, you're going against your religion. It's like, that's the point of separation of church and state. It's you can do one without the other. They're separate entities for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, they don't want to teach certain things. They don't want to learn certain things. They're kind of proud of their ignorance. I mean, I don't know if she's making a joke when she talks about being on the cover of Rolling Stones.
Oh, you caught that too. Thank God.
Oh, yeah.
Thank God. Oh, dear God. What? You don't know what you're talking about, lady. You probably only listen to, I don't know, insert name of religious band, Jars of Clay. That's probably one of them. But yeah, Rolling Stones. Oh, God.
And when the guy's like, protoplasm, whatever that is, and it's like, protoplasm's a thing, dude. It's a word, and it has a meaning to it. But, for him, it's all about, like, God has written a book about your life, and it's all predetermined. And it's like, wow, okay.
Way to make those kids feel like they have any chance in life.
Exactly.
And that's the crazy part. And that's towards the end of the film. And I think the middle of the film is really the part that I don't know, I find to be the most fascinating, because the end of the film, if we're talking about this just in a purely film standpoint, the end of the film feels padded out, where they go to Colorado Springs and then they go to Washington. That almost feels unnecessary in a way. Like, I didn't need to see that to know that was happening, if that makes sense. I mean, it's funny to see Ted Haggard rallying against homosexuality. Oh, don't get me wrong. That guy, hypocrite. It's okay. You were having sex with a gay prostitute and buying meth from him. So do as I say, not as I do. I'm sure that's some Bible thing that you could pull out of your ass. But man, that guy, I mean, knowing what we know about him now is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can kind of see your point, but at the same time, some people really need to they can't just say like, oh, I know this is happening. They actually have to see it. And that's kind of the job of the filmmaker, is to say, yeah, guys, you might think that this part is scary, but here we're going to ratchet it up and talk about how this actually affects you. Because these people who are, living wherever and kind of, like they're not the backwoods, they're in middle America.
Oh, they're 20 miles outside of Kansas City.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, all right, they're still kind of like sheltering themselves in this community and the homeschooling and all these kind of things. They've got their own camps, their own this, their own that, their own TV programs, all these kind of things, their own music. Okay, that's great, but we have to show at the end how that affects, this a-hole that's sitting in Detroit, or this, bumfuck who's out in Nebraska. Like, they make an impact on our lives, and that's where it gets really scary.
Well, and that's the thing they talk about, and that's back to the first thing we were talking about, which these kids are my age now. These kids, the first time they got to vote, actually these kids are a little younger than me. So I think the first time some of them would have gotten to vote would have been last election for Donald Trump.
Not that anything bad happened last election.
Right. Obviously, the election in 2008, Barack Obama beat John McCain. That's one thing we could talk about, but that's not these kids.
Right.
That's not their generation. These are the generation that, and I don't want to really jump to this conclusion, but they had a hand in electing Donald Trump.
Them or some Russian hackers.
Oh, dear God. Everything is Donald Trump now. Like, oh God, and it's just like, it's the worst. Like, this is the worst that he is the president. Not only because, but one of the things is like, you can't escape it. Mm-hmm. I don't remember it being like this with Obama. Maybe it was. But it's like, you can't escape everything Donald Trump all the time.
Right.
And I'm just like, I almost want to look at some people and be like, do you not have anything better to do? Do you not have an actual life? Like, I have bills I have to pay that are not inherently affected by Donald Trump in any form or fashion. And it's like, can we talk about something else? But these people are one of the reasons that Donald Trump got elected. It's this radicalized far-right Christian base that, again, refuse to believe certain things because of the circular logic that they have acquired due to the feedback loop that is their lives that their religion has created for them.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the most important takeaway from this film. If there is a takeaway, it's that they talked about in this movie 12 years ago how these kids were going to affect things. And it happened.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely happened. And isn't being a martyr cool?
Yeah.
I feel like you're beaten down.
No, that's why I say that this movie is scary to me, because I see these folks and I'm just like, this is really frightening, because they are breathing the same air that I'm breathing, and it's just, I'm afraid that it's catchy. I don't.
But that's the thing that makes America great, is that they're allowed to breathe the same air as us. Right?
Yeah.
It's not like Eastern Europe in the 40s and 50s where someone who was doing this would be put to death.
But you see, I have no ill will towards folks. They can believe what they want to do. It's when they start to push that agenda out on other people, and that's where so many people differ. Because, like, for me as a liberal person, I'm just like, you do what you want as long as it's not hurting me. Like, go ahead. That's fine. You worship Satan. You wash your feet on Sundays. You wear a veil. You do whatever you want to do, as long as it's not hurting me. Like, I don't care when I go to the grocery store and there are, women in there who are dressed head to toe in a burqa or whatever. And it's just like, okay, yeah, whatever. That's their thing, man. That's their thing. Now, if they came up to me and they're just like, you're going to die because you're not, you don't get with Allah and you're eating pork and then we have a problem, but that doesn't happen. But these folks who are just like, they'll get in your face and be like, you believe in this and that, and you're a horrible person. It's just like, yeah, we have an issue. Now it's on, motherfucker. And
I think the reason that is, Mike, isn't it because more percentage of people in this country are Christian than anything else?
Right.
Right. It's confirmation bias, right? There are more Christians in this country, so the likelihood a Christian comes up to you and says that is more likely anyways.
But it's just also this sense of entitlement, man.
I agree. I have had friends, I've had this conversation with them when they try to push it. I'm like, dude, look, you're not changing my mind. And you know what? That's fine, because I'm not changing your mind either. So you can sit and look at me and say, well, you're going to hell. It's like, I'm okay with that.
Right.
Because A, I don't believe in it, so it doesn't affect me anyways. And C, if I tried to explain my ideas to you, you wouldn't listen to them anyways.
Right.
So we're all operating in our circular racetracks in the sky or in the ground, I believe what I believe. So, they're not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change their mind. So we're all in our own loops here. So maybe that's the big takeaway here. Maybe the big takeaway here is we need to be able to have conversation. And I am one of the people who wants to have conversation with these people. But I want to have a conversation, a frank conversation, not a proselytizing conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And these folks in this film, Becky Fischer specifically, are the kinds of people who use charisma and the cult of personality to prey upon those who have not gotten the chance yet to form a personality, coherent thought in their mind about who they want to be, and they are robbed of that. And I think that more than anything else, that's the worst part of this movie, is watching people being robbed of the ability to be who they want to be because they don't even know that they never got the chance to begin with.
Right. Yeah, it's like you're just seeing these kids and imagining the therapy bills.
Yeah. Well, but imagine the non-existent therapy bills, because 3 of the 4 children in the film that are featured are still praying to the Lord and hating Harry Potter.
True. Yeah, and the idea of psychiatry and psychology is, that's the devil's work.
Yeah.
And also, taking antidepressants or any of those kind of things, also the devil's work.
Also contraceptives.
Oh, yeah.
Devil's work. But talking dinosaurs, on the other hand...
That's fine.
That's fine by me. What would you give this film out of 5, Mike?
I'd give it 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. 4 out of 5 is what I would give it as well. It's a good film.
It is.
It really is. It's one of those documentaries, like you said, that sticks out in my mind. And I love documentaries. I really do. And we're in a documentary boom here. Everything is getting a documentary, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of the ones that's like, this is really one of those ones that I think is going to stick forever.
Yeah, and that's one of those things is like, if you haven't seen this movie, I would highly recommend that you see it, just because there's a segment of the population that you may not be familiar with that you really should be familiar with.
And watch this over shit, and I really say shit like Bill Maher's Religulous.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk... Okay, so that's the other thing, right? You've got a film like this talking about the evangelicals, and then you've got a film like Religulous, which talks about the other side of the coin, the kind of people that... The kind of people that I can't stand on the other side.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was speaking in tongues for a second there. Sorry.
That's just second nature to me. Why would you include this in the documentary? That is what they said. She's like, it's just second nature to us. It's like, you know what? It's not second nature to anybody else.
Oh, sorry. Before we wrap up, the one that got me so much was when she was talking about like, oh yeah, I could go up to a group of kids and I could have them seeing visions within a matter of minutes. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
It's like, how to get kids. It's easy.
Really? Oh, they have these kids eating out of their hands. I mean, yeah, it's just, yeah. And then when they just start, the speaking in tongues thing really gets me. It's like, what is all this garbage going on?
Well, I will never understand the speaking in tongues, because to me it just seems like gobbledygook baby talk.
It is gobbledygook baby talk. I love some of the like TV preachers when they're like compilations of them speaking in tongues.
Oh, it's like, yeah. What I wonder is. And I actually don't have any friends that believe in the speaking in tongues thing. I want to meet someone that believes in the speaking in tongues side of religion and ask them, like, why? What is this doing? Is it like, are you being... I guess I'm assuming, and this is an assumption, and you can email me and tell me that I'm wrong, Chris@cultureshock.com, that it's the Holy Spirit coming over you.
Oh, yeah.
Washing over you.
Yeah, one of my coworkers... see, this is the great thing. One of my coworkers, who is an itinerant liar, she was talking about how she was going to be on this TV program about this religious experience that she had and how she started to speak in tongues in church and all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be on a TV show. You probably haven't been interviewed for a TV show. There's probably no TV show that exists. And you probably didn't speak in tongues ever. And basically, I think that speaking in tongues is just people being goofy and lying.
And it is.
Yeah.
In my mind, but again, we're not the ones who are, I don't know. This isn't for us.
We're not the target audience.
Yeah. It's like, oh. No, but again, there's people on both sides of this. There's the people like Bill Maher, who are the insufferable atheists who...
Yeah, smarmy. Fucking smarmy.
Yeah, Bill Maher, man, I used to love him, but he's such a cock. He is just a cock in the worst way, and I can't stand him. And then you've got the people on the other side, which is these folks, the evangelical right.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
From the White House, we present Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. In the councils of government, we must guard against the military-industrial complex.
The United States is the greatest force for good in the world. We have not an obligation to go out and start wars, certainly to spread democracy and freedom throughout the world.
The defense budget is $750 billion. Profits went up last year well over 25%. When war becomes that profitable, you're going to see more of it.
There is a huge flow of cash into defense industry.
$66 billion for our men and women in uniform.
$100 million to upgrade 10 additional B-1 bombers.
You do have to follow the money.
It's the representative's duty to bring home the bacon.
God bless our contractors.
Now, kids are dying. Billions are being spent every month.
And the American people are scratching their heads going, how do we get here?
This is not about one president or one party.
When does the United States go from a force for good to a force of imperialism?
We've got an empire. There is no excuse for 725 American military bases in 130 foreign countries.
I think numbers almost are distracting.
9/11 showed us war can be privatized, instruction can be privatized. What we are risking is the republic itself.
Collusion is our business. Collusion with the military.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
It is nowhere written that the American empire goes on forever.
That's right, on the next Culture Cast, we're talking about Why We Fight, a film that, documentary I've never seen, but it's about the military-industrial complex, so, boy, it's pretty prescient, wouldn't you say, Mr. White?
I would.
So, until then, where can people find you? What are you up to these days, Mr. White?
Are you going to call me, or are you going to call me Eric?
I'm going to call you, not Eric. I'm going to call you White Mike.
Okay. Well, every day I'm working over at the Projection Booth, which is at projection-booth.com, which is another podcast, which I do exclusively in tongues. So if you enjoyed me speaking in tongues on this, you will enjoy that podcast where I discuss movies like and so
I thought I thought the podcast name was actually the That's what you should just change the name to. That booth. Okay. You get probably a completely different subset of people who listen and be like, oh, that podcast is really great. I completely understand what he's talking about. then you know that those are the people whose iTunes reviews are the ones who are just like, I don't really put a whole lot of credence into anything that these people are saying.
They are stridently anti-Trump. If I wanted to hear somebody tear down Trump, I'd listen to that kind of podcast. I wanted to hear a movie show.
Yeah. So the Projection Booth, what else? You doing something else? You doing anything else?
I am also, as always, doing a podcast with you, sir, which is called the Kolchak Tapes, which is available at kolchaktapes.com and over on iTunes, where I would encourage people to go and download the show, rate and review it. And also, we've got a new show coming up. Are we ready to announce Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast?
I think you just did, even if...
Holy cow. I don't know when that's coming out.
You gotta give your best Harry Carey. Holy cow.
Holy Toledo.
Oh, that's a great souvenir for someone in the first row. Oh, God. I don't know what's coming. It's coming out towards the end of the month, so we're good.
Yeah. So sometime in August, maybe September, we'll get out there. It'll be a new thing.
And I guarantee you, once it comes out, you'll hear about it on every podcast that you and I do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can follow... Can they follow you on Twitter?
Yes, they can, at ProBoothcast.
I thought it was at... Man, this is going to be just like the running gag now. Just like you and I just completely just making a mockery of everything that these people hold dear. Which is like the antithesis of what I wanted to do, but, as they say in the industry, you brought it upon yourself.
I thought they said,
I did say that too, actually. Oh, God. Where can people follow you on Twitter?
ProBoothcast.
And people can follow me on Twitter at casualty_Chris. That's my new Twitter handle. You can also follow the Culturecast at Culturecast on Twitter and head on over to culturecast.com for the feed for the Culturecast. We're also on all podcatcher apps, Android and iOS. There you'll also find links to our Patreon account where you can kick a couple dollars our way. We have $1, $5, $10, $15, and $50 levels now, so if you want to give us $1, cool. If not, Big thanks as always to Erica and Mavoka for our intro song, and my buddy Justin for our outro song. And big thanks to you, Mike, for programming this entire month of documentaries that are really, really, really good.
Well, I just hope that your listeners are in agreement.
Well, and if they're not, I think we're done there.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
You know how we do, I'm just two-step, drink in my right hand, phone in my other hand, getting to the money, oh man, two-step, posted with the crew, yeah, you know how we do.
Hey, two-step, you know what I'm saying, 1, 2, 1, 2, Benjamin, aka the Black T, you know what I'm saying, catch me with my crew every day, two-step, phone in my other hand, like, hello? Oh, get into the money, man. Yeah.